Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Sophia Fojas,
I'm Joelle Hanson, CTE coordinator for the county office.
and I am the new arts coordinator for the County Office of Education, and we wanted to present to you Teaching the Arts Virtually. So you see our Artspiration is the arts initiative for the county office, and then you see the CTE.
Arts, media, and entertainment industry pathway through career technical education.
And the reason we're teamed together is because the media arts piece, the new fifth content area, the new fifth arts discipline, which was added January 9th of 2019, overlaps with CTE's arts and media entertainment. So we're happy partners in the work.
Yay.
Yes. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about teaching virtually in the arts and specifically, but that it's really an opportunity. Do you want to say anything about that, Joelle?
That this is a time that we're going to have sort of a broader conversation today and to get the discussion going, because we know everybody's at different points in distance learning on the continuum. And so today's conversation is going to be broad.
Mm-hmm. And it really is about learning the platform in a new way. So this platform is new to all of us, students and teachers alike, for the most part. And it is about taking education and some of its previous obstacles and really looking at it in a new and different way. What it is not, though, is teaching the class that you would normally teach in the classroom online. We're not here to create that kind of experience. It's how can we tweak our classroom experience to operate in such a way that students are engaged and want to do the work that you're presenting.
Yeah, I think we were talking about the classroom is actually where the student is located. Wherever they're located and listening to the instruction, the classroom actually becomes where they're located at, which is why these tips are essential.
Mm-hmm. So these tips come from a teacher, Kareem Farah, who has been operating online for a long time, and these are some of piece of advice that he is giving to us. So simplicity being the key, knowing that this is new for teachers and students alike, and then keeping things very simple in terms of delivery of instruction, knowing that students can't be there to interact with you in person. How can you deliver the instruction in a way that is simple, direct, straightforward, and that your communication is effective with this kind of separation? Establishing a digital home base. This is really important because the way that we're interacting has a natural kind of distance. And so whatever platform you use, whether it be Zoom or Google Classroom or Seesaw, is establishing that as really a place we're establishing a new kind of home for the classroom and being consistent in that. Do you want to say anything around number 3, Joelle?
Well, again, looking at keeping the first two key points and then looking at prioritizing longer student-driven assignments, that choice becomes a thing that's important, especially when you want to keep the students engaged in an atmosphere that is distant to them, that can disengage them just by the platform itself.
And in some ways, doing this, making sure that the student assignments are longer, it gives you the space with which to develop your curriculum, because what you don't want to do is put yourself on such a tight time frame that it's impossible for the teacher to maintain that kind of momentum. So thinking that we do have the space to develop curriculum that's more thoughtful, that's full of reflection, that is not teacher driven, that is much more student driven, gives us the space to sort of breathe and makes it a less stressful experience.
Gives you the time also as a teacher to troubleshoot should anything come up within the assignment itself, whether it's an intervention that needs to take place, a technical intervention, technology intervention, or a student intervention. It gives you that breathing room to be able to have the time to be able to do that too.
Yeah, and I think, Joelle, you and I were talking about this before. We're suddenly IT, as well as a content specialist, as well as sort of a distance, inspirational speaker. So giving us the space to sort of deal with the technical aspects of this delivery system is really important. And then I know Joelle knows this as having been a principal, and all of us having been teachers, but individual touch points with students are really game changers. And how can we make sure that this doesn't serve to be an alienating, sort of isolating experience for our students, but how are we developing consistent ways to communicate with students and be able to monitor their progress?
Yeah, this gets to the social emotional learning part of the students, because as Sophia and I were talking about this, we really don't know what's happening on the other end of the monitor for those students. What's their family life like? What's the stressors in their life? And so being able to have opportunities to be able to have those individual touch points are really important to the student.
Yeah. Right. So simplicity. If you're feeling overwhelmed by this daunting task, you're certainly not alone. And the idea that we are in this space learning together, not just learning how to interact with each other in a sort of an isolationist kind of platform, but also letting go of what perfection is. Some of the conceptions that we have of what instruction looks like or what student interaction looks like, these are all going to be challenged. And really the teacher is being a facilitator of learning and not in charge of the learning is really key to being able to pivot in this new format. Did you want to say something about home base?
So it's really important for the students and for the teacher to use one platform and not toggle between them. This will keep this is the simplicity part also, and also the technical part, being IT all of a sudden. By using one platform, you lessen the troubleshooting, you create a consistency that students need in a world that right now is pretty, not consistent. And then make sure that that you understand all of the devices that your students have so that they can be able to participate in that platform. And then also, where are the students' skill sets at to be able to do the tasks at hand?
Yeah, computer literacy and typing skills is something that as we move into the virtual platform, things like access to devices, and I would even go so far as to say, even those families that do have access, is their internet signal robust enough to handle 3 or 4 or 5 people at the same time online in an online setting? And so what access now looks like becomes much more nuanced. Not do we have the devices, but how are we interacting where there are so many devices happening within a small space? And it's a space that we don't have control over as teachers. I always thought of the classroom as sort of the third component. It's the student, the teacher, the space. And now we're not in control of the space, but we are in control with how students have gain access and are able to participate. So that's really an important thing to consider.
And maybe have contingency plans for those students who may not have high access or high speed access to internet, or devices that may not be compatible with some of the applications you may be using.
Right. And what does meaningful analog options look like in your learning, in your teaching environment. Because as we know, worksheets aren't always the best way for students to be able to be thoughtful in their learning, but what are some of the ways that are separate from technology that could create those kinds of rich, diverse learning experiences? And segues to this, the assignments really need to be student driven. And it's in 3 layers. So create opportunities for just students to discuss with their families, because now we have a 4th component, not just their space, not just you as the teacher and the student, but their families. Their families are much more involved. So what in our teaching is giving the opportunity for family to feel supported and involved in their child's learning. And then an element of student choice. We talk about this, but what does this really look like in a meaningful way in order to build engagement? How much latitude do students have in your classroom to be able to jump off into something that they're interested in? And what kind of home base are you creating, in what kind of foundational structures are you creating in your teaching to allow for that? And then there aren't any reflection questions in our presentation, but that is something that needs to be a part of every assignment. It isn't just learning information, because information is cheap, but it is about how a student assimilates that information, how they absorb it, and then what they do with it in terms of higher levels of thinking. Joelle, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so because career technical education is very similar to art in that these were, hands-on type, almost like a laboratory setting courses. Like how do we transition to these types of things? So one example that's not in AME but is in construction and manufacturing is this HVAC is one of the things, the skills that students learn. So one of the ways that because you don't have an HVAC system to sit there and work on was that a teacher developed a self-audit for going and looking at your own HVAC system or heating system in your home and do a self-evaluation based off of the learning. So this process of distance learning drives us to really challenge students to apply knowledge within their own home setting. So when you start thinking about applying art content or arts, media, entertainment content, how can you utilize what's already in most students' homes that they can apply that concept to?
Mm-hmm. And Sandy had a question. Can you please give us some examples, speaking back to the touch points with art students? So I've been monitoring arts education websites and webinars, and some of the things that teachers do in terms of doing small breakouts. One of the things that is, when you're, for instance, a dance teacher had been discussing, here's an example, about assessment of learning concepts, and how a student is supposed to be able to demonstrate that concept. There is a way for, and this can be done in all of the arts content areas, but most notably, students feel very, very much vulnerable where you're using your body. So anything to do with dance or drama or music, where you're demonstrating your knowledge and it feels high anxiety. A lot of teachers employ the use of assessments where students are able to demonstrate their learning offline, not in front of everybody in the virtual realm, but ways of delivering their knowledge in a way that it's a more one-on-one, so that the teacher, so they can send a little clip of what they've learned. That's a touch point. And it's also very simply having the teacher call families and just seeing how they are. It's really a time, the social emotional aspect of this learning platform is very important. And one of the things we're not going to spend a great deal of time on, but we do recognize that it is a really important component of this and needs to be addressed, and it needs to be embedded in your instruction. Okay. So it is about, again, communicating with students and families. Joelle, when you were a principal, what multiple forms were you able to use outside of the phone?
So some of the things, I mean, some of these you have to realize may be a little static, but at least it's an update. So just as we get updates at the county office on a weekly basis from our superintendent, as a principal, I did weekly newsletters to the staff and then monthly newsletters to the students in a time where we were, you know, at the school. But I would, if I were a principal at this time, I would be giving weekly updates, just because that constant, consistent communication gave people a sense of consistency and feeling supported. And so also we have open office hours. I'm sure that teachers may be able to do open office hours also. So when students or parents have a question, they can maybe, you know, email in a time that they want to talk to the teacher. But just having multiple different forms of ways of communicating, and knowing and understanding that not everybody will have the opportunity to take that communication. So when you see that maybe there's a gap with somebody, you want to then make a personal communication on your part to that person who may not be communicating very well. So reaching out.
Right. And also, I mean, we're actually a Google, many of the school districts operate in the Google platform, and Google has something called Google Voice. And I noticed, I don't know that we have it at the county office, but it is a reality. Teachers and are using their phones and texting, just not only just emails and phone calls, but they're also using texting as a form of just more immediate contact with families. And so Google Voice is a really great way of giving out a phone number. It goes across all platforms. It goes to your phone, it goes to your email, and I think it also goes into the cloud. So it's a way that parents can contact you anytime, and you can limit the number of hours that it actually communicates with you. So you can make it, you know, from 8 to 5 or 7 to 6, and so it's a way for families to be able to stay in touch with their teachers in ways that when I was a kid, that certainly wasn't. But it is the fact that there is much more immediacy of communication is a reality today, and the ways to manage that so that it doesn't become overwhelming in the shelter in place is really important.
Yes.
As is finding ways for students to connect with each other in a safe way. I don't know, Joelle, do you have any?
Well, I just would be cognizant of there are, I mean, students are very connected via social platforms, social media platforms. So we did have Facebook groups, but if you're going to create a Facebook group, know that you're going to have to kind of monitor the Facebook group. So we created Facebook groups at my high school for various different people to be able to share information and so forth. And there was one person that was monitoring to ensure that there was no cyberbullying going on or you know, inappropriateness. But I think before even doing that, you just, as a class, I found it always helpful for my students to create norms so they understood the what are the norms and what are the social contracts that we're going to have with each other as a class so that we can connect and support each other.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, there are apps that come with being on Google where students, and it is Facebook-like, where teachers can actually build a class and ways of communicating with students. Again, it's a closed group and it's attached to Facebook. So there are concerns with, there can be privacy concerns. Nonetheless, the range of things is really vast. Okay. All right. So here we come to discipline-specific resources. One of the things, and I was very cognizant, I think in our coordinator meetings, we talked about being mindful about the resources that we put out there. Don't just put lists of things. Organize the information in such a way that makes it useful and meaningful. And believe it or not, New Jersey has put out these resources per content area that were really easy to understand and to organize. And I think in subsequent webinars, we'd like to explore more specific examples. Everything that you need to consider in a regular classroom is tenfold in a classroom which absolutely requires and mandates group activity and collaboration and cooperation. And so rather than discuss specific resources, I mean, we'd like to take bits and pieces of this webinar and break it out into basically a series. And so I can share with you one of the, let's see, all right. For instance, so we talk about Facebook pages and groups. One of the things, and some of this are things where you can do a free trial. And right now on our own website, we have resources, and it's divided by content area and grade level. And some of the resources are parent-facing and family-facing, and some are teacher-facing. And so it's really important that when we talk about resources, that it's organized in a manageable way. Here's one that talks about social emotional learning and music and some of the resources that are available at home. And Create California, for instance, has a resource for families for creating art at home. And there are numerous, those of us at county offices across the state also are organizing and developing resources. The list is vast, and we'd like to have the opportunity to share this in subsequent webinars. Did you want to go over the CTE online?
Sure.
Please?
So for media, well, for any of the CTE industries and the 50 million different pathways, there's a free access to CTE online. And the thing that I really liked about this particular website was not only that you could pick between the industries and the pathways, so if you were interested in media, that it actually gives a template to lesson plan with some things to think about specifically for CTE. And each industry pathway is going to have some unique things about it. But one of the templates had a model lesson on around looking at different media sources to determine their legitimacy. So looking at them and determining, is that what's the source, where is it coming from, is this a biased thing, is it not biased? So really getting into the digital literacy piece. And I thought that the template was pretty easy to understand. It broke it down into that simplicity piece, things to be looking and thinking about that we went over in this webinar. But I invite people to look at this particular online site because they have numerous lessons that have been done and a really good outline of how to develop those in a distance learning kind of platform.
Okay. And then additional resources, and the other conversation came up with an arts partner in our county. There are teaching artists as well as teachers and educators in K-12 that are supporting arts education in the classroom. And so there are a host of additional resources specifically aimed at the non-credentialed teaching artist. And so archives, I actually just did a webinar myself with the National Guild for Community Arts Education. They're a group, an advocacy group around community arts, really born out of the settlement schools around at the turn of the last 2 centuries. Then Teaching Artists Guild, which is a collaboration of teaching artists. It's a resource for teaching artists based in California. And then the New York City Arts and Education Roundtable. Creative Generation is specifically around the youth workforce development and engaging youth. National Guild also has a youth workforce development piece for students who are for students by students. And then again, the Teaching Artists of the Mid-Atlantic, another based on the East Coast, sort of the sister organization to Teaching Artists Guild. So this is a real component of arts education in California, is the arts organizations who have stepped up to fill in the breach left by, believe it or not, Prop 13 and the defunding of arts in the public schools. So as we have gotten more momentum around arts education, we still have a group of arts organizations that are really supporting arts in the classroom. Okay, Joelle, wrap it up.
You can do it, or we can do it. It's like Rosie the Riveter, right? We're in this together. We're all learning this together, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed, because I think we all are experiencing the same thing as the dates of shelter in place move along with the with our world. But think about making this kind of fun. How can you engage the students and engage yourself, and then just really staying positive? Know that Sophia and I are planning on looking at specific things to be talking about based on the webinar that we just had right now, and that we look forward to people being able to come on board and ask questions and start discussing, because maybe this can turn into a community of practice around certain areas where we can all be in this learning piece together, that we're not alone, we're not isolated, and our world isn't just limited to the monitor that right now we're sitting in front of.
And I would even say that look at some of the ways that education hasn't served certain students, and how can we make this platform meaningful really for every single student. And really this is an amazing opportunity to be able to think creatively about education, and about having students really drive their own learning, and how can we be facilitators in this. And it's really an exciting time. So here is our, sorry about that, our information. Artspiration is the arts education initiative of the Santa Clara County Office of Education. I have open collaboration times between 2 and 3 o'clock on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And again, I'm available by appointment as well. Send me an email. Would love to talk to you about what's happening out in the field. I'm very excited. Joelle?
And I also have open collaboration time around career technical education. Usually it's focusing on upcoming funding, particular industry sectors. Last week was information computer technology. This week we may be focusing on a different industry pathway, but we welcome teachers into this discussion so that we because your input helps us as educators and coordinators build supports for you. So we look forward to hearing back from everyone on what their needs are and what they're interested in learning more about.
Absolutely. And here is the way to contact us again: by email. And again, we look forward very much to hearing from you and having you guide us in our work, because we're here to support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.